More and more Republicans are against war, unless the Congress declares war. Congressman Scott Garrett is here to explain.
Forget U.S. military action abroad. There's a war brewing right here within the Obama administration. The New York Times reports that President Obama ignored the advice of top lawyers in the Pentagon and the Justice Department by continuing operations in Libya without congressional authorization beyond the 60 days specified under the War Powers Act. Here to discuss New Jersey Republican Congressman Scott Garrett. Scott, welcome here. It's a pleasure, as always.
It's always good to be with you.
Before we get to this particular issue of Libya,
okay,
were you surprised when, during the Republican debate the other night on another network, when almost all of them, to differing degrees and with different sets of enthusiasm, said, bring the troops home? We're overextended. We don't need 900 military installations around the world, and the Pentagon is spending too much money.
Surprised, no, because I think the candidates there that on that debate were just reflective of what the American public sentiment is. I guess the only surprise is that that message is getting from the public to those candidates, but somehow it doesn't get all the way to the White House, because the White House continues to go in this direction in vain, I believe.
How has there been this change in attitude amongst the Republicans on the issue of war? I mean, this is basically some of the same people who voted to authorize George W. Bush and his successors, Barack Obama, of course, to engage in an open-ended war. This isn't a declaration of war where somebody's going to surrender and it's over. They can just continue this war for as long as that congressional authorization to use military force is still the law.
Well, that certainly is a problem there. But I think the dynamics, of course, were different in two respects with regard to George Bush. What was that? First of all, is how President Bush handled it. He, besides going to the UN and going to the international community, what did he do? He went to Congress as well. He went there first. This is something that President Obama didn't do. And secondly, with regard to those military involvements, at least at the time, there was an apparent U.S. interest, both in Afghanistan, of course, with regard to the fact that Al-Qaeda was over there and the Taliban was over there and 9/11 had just occurred. With regard to Iraq, of course, at the time, at least, there was the suspect of weapons of mass destruction, which could be a threat to the United States. So in both instances, the threats to the United States were there. Both are missing in Libya.
Even though I've not hesitated to criticize President Bush when I felt he stepped outside the Constitution, at least in this instance, there was a great national debate, nationwide, and on the floor of the Congress. There was a national consensus to do what the Congress authorized George W. Bush to do, and with what he did militarily. How much of a debate has there been on Libya? How much of a consensus is there in the Congress or nationally for us to be bombing Libya?
Well, you and I are just having about as much debate right here that we had on the floor of the House of Representatives. Basically, none went before the President made the decision, and only after the fact there's been some debate, but that's all one-sided. That's by us, mainly on the Republican side, and some Democrats saying what he's doing is not constitutional, it's not legal, but certainly no activity before he took these military engagement.
And what is the Congress going to do about it? I know that you're the head of the Constitutional Caucus. I know you didn't assign the lawsuit trying to get a federal judge to enjoin the president, but you and I have talked about this. I don't think a judge is going to get involved in this arena at all. But what can members of Congress do? The Republicans control the House. What can they do to stop him, or at least force him to comply with federal law?
Well, you know what Speaker Boehner did. Of course, he did the resolution that came to the floor at the same time that Dennis Kucinich's resolution came to the floor. I actually tried to push the Republican resolution one step further. You may not know this. You probably do, of course. I went to the Rules Committee and said, let's take the Speaker Boehner's amendment resolution and go one step further and say that not only do we want to report from the President what you did, we want him to seek authorization from us, and if you don't seek authorization, we want to cut all funding to it. Now, my resolution did not get into the final version, so now we are here. We are 2 weeks past, and we have to take that action.
Which is worse, when the President steals power from the Congress or when the Congress lets him take it?
But both are bad, and both are what the Founding Fathers never intended for the Congress to be in this situation, where we have to now try to grab back power and try to constrain him by the power of the purse, which, as you know, is very difficult to do after the fact.
And will there be efforts to grab that power
Yes, there
back?
will absolutely be efforts to do so. It'll be trying to do it in the appropriation bills going forward, but the problem is, as you know, procedurally what happens. We'll get through the committee, get through the House, go over to the Senate. What happens in the Senate, I don't know. And when they get to the White House, we know what he'll do with that. It's going to be very hard. It's always hard once you give up power to ever reclaim it again.
Congressman Scott Garrett from the great state of New Jersey, thanks for being here, and thanks for this battle you're waging.
Appreciate it.